Boom. Hey guys, I'm Zach. Welcome to my shop. I figured since I am currently working from home, what a perfect opportunity to kind of show you guys around my shop space because I've never done anything like this. So this is my shop space. It is a 19 by 19 and a half foot 2-car garage. And it's got a raised ceiling, which actually makes storage a lot easier for things that are not woodworking based and kind of makes the space overall just feel bigger. So when I first moved into this space, it was completely empty. I'm gonna throw a picture up so you can see what it looked like. Down to the studs, I think there was 2 electrical outlets in the place. And there was 1 light in the center of the garage. Just an incredible blank slate for me to kind of build out my first shop and make this space what I want it to be. So I think what I want to do is kind of mix this video up a little bit. I'm going to show you just a mini tour of my shop and also kind of introduce a project that I tackled about a year ago in this space, which you guys have probably seen in the background of my videos. So without further ado, let's just kind of start the tour. All right, cool. So we are over in the corner of the shop. There's quite a few outlets back here that kind of control like the sprinklers. And when I first moved into the garage, this was a set of electrical that was on a completely, or it was already established. So it was on its own set of circuit breakers. So it's kind of nice having that set up there because it means that I can plug in my dust collector system to it, and then everything else in the shop that me and a friend of mine did when I first moved in is wired on separate circuits. So it kind of allows me to run kind of like a big tool at once and my dust collection system. So starting in this corner, this is my dust collector. It is the Rockler 650 CFM wall-mounted dust right collector thing. These are 4-inch dust ports. I have it plumbed into a 4 or 5-inch Oneida Cyclone. So when I first got this thing, I just had a couple of these 4-inch Rockler dust hoses running from it without the Cyclone. And what I noticed was when I was doing things like planing wood or using a jointer or just kind of vacuuming up bigger chunks of wood in the shop, a lot of times right up here where the propeller is, or the fan, it was often getting like really clogged up. And so adding this chip separator as something that brings in all of the dust and separates the big stuff and lets it fall into this 15-gallon thing and then pulls all the fine dust into here was super helpful. And this thing never clogs up anymore, and it's more than enough power for this basically 400 square foot shop that I have. And I also have it plugged into a smart plug, which means if I'm over at the table saw or I'm over at one of my other machines that's using the dust port and I don't feel like walking over to it, I can just say, Alexa, turn on the vacuum. Okay. All right, well that thing powers down. I'm just gonna show you kind of the rest of the ducting of the shop. So again, I read somewhere, or I heard somewhere that it was best to have a couple of feet of just straight pipe coming out of it to get kind of the best suction. That then has a Y that breaks down into this hose, which I use most often for kind of cleaning up the shop or running it over to like the drill press if I'm creating a ton of chips for that. And then I also have this kind of floor mounted thing where I can just, if I want to, kind of pull these things out and change up the flow of the air. And it's been really useful where I can just sweep things up to it. And it just kind of helps keep the shop a lot cleaner. So super useful to have if you're gonna do something like your own ducting with PVC pipes. Highly recommend doing that. So again, I can just kind of close these up. That one's a little bit stuck, ignore that. I actually highly recommend these. They kind of push out from both sides so that if there's any chips kind of caught in them, it'll push them out when you're kind of resetting them, and then you can just twist them into place. So this ducting runs up above my ceiling and then has a couple of more drop downs. Again, these are all controlled by blast gates. Have an extra 4-inch hose here, which I attach to these tools, which I'll talk about in a second. And then I just kind of ended it over here because again, the shop is like always changing and it's a work in progress. And I actually have another 4-inch dust hose. So as things kind of develop, I'll figure out if I want to hook that up or maybe plumb it along this wall. One thing I wanted to do was have a dedicated 4-inch port that goes to my table saw. So this is the SawStop 30-inch contractor saw. Love this thing. Kind of wish I had gotten the 36-inch with the T-Glide fence. This was like the first real big purchase I ever made once I moved into my own space. It's incredible. It's heavy, it's robust, it's incredibly precise. It's the 1 3/4 horsepower, runs on 110, so you don't need like any 220 hookups to run it. I did add the mobile base to it, so you can just with 1 foot step on it, move it around. All right, so making our way around, like we said, dust collection kind of runs along this wall. Here's where I keep kind of my bigger or semi-big machines. All of these are on wheels. So this is my 6-inch grizzly joiner. It's not a helical head, but I got it for 300 bucks to use from somebody in my local area on Craigslist. Use it probably once every 3 videos, depending on the woodworking project I'm doing. It's cheaper to buy rough lumber, so having a mixture of like a joiner and a planer and a table saw to mill things up takes a little bit more time, but ends up saving you a lot of money. Okay, next hit, I have the Rockler router table setup. I love this thing. I've had it for, again, about 2 years, basically since I moved into the shop. If you can see underneath, it has this kind of dust collection port system. So basically on top you have this hose that is plumbed into the back. So when you're spinning it, a lot of the chips can fall into there, and then anything else will drop down into this. And then there is a 4-inch port behind there that just allows you to pipe one of these hoses directly into it and creates a really clean experience. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I learned moving into my own shop was just figuring out how to control the cleanliness of it, both for my own personal safety and just it's a pain in the ass to clean up dust all the time. So kind of maximizing your dust collection wherever possible, highly recommend. This is a flip top cart. This is also one of the first things that I built. Got the design from Brad Rodriguez over at Fix This Build That. So on it I have big 12-inch disc sander from Harbor Freight. Incredibly heavy, weighs like 100 pounds, was really difficult to install on this thing by myself. But love having this thing. Having a big disc sander is really good for just removing a ton of material quickly and kind of shaping things. So have loved having that recently. And then on the bottom I have a rigid 13-inch thickness planer. It's a beast. Love being able to just flip this thing over, plug in my hose to it on either tool, and yeah, like I said, be able to like mill my own lumber, shape things, clean things up quickly after a glue up, just things that help speed up your workflow. So super handy to have. Along this wall I have 2 6-foot by 3-foot tall cabinets. They were originally, I think, red oak, and I painted them blue just because they were ugly. And one thing I did, and I made a video on it, is I just swapped all of the sliding doors with whiteboard hardboard material because basically now I just have all this whiteboard space in case I want to write things down or write down measurements. So above those cabinets there is a plywood rack. It's built from an entire sheet of 4x8 by 3/4 inch plywood. Super modular. I didn't have a whole lot of space there, so good useful design to be able to just make it 2 things tall. And I don't really keep a whole lot of lumber in my shop. I just don't have the space, but it's useful to get things off the ground because it clears up floor space for you. This is my miniature crane, which really serves no purpose, but it was the first welding project I ever tackled. Basically, I just wanted something to help kind of dive into MIG welding, and it was a super fun project to do. I kind of use it over here on this other work surface, and it holds, welding gear and kind of blocks those cabinets, so still figuring that out. This is my old Outfeed table. I'll talk about my new one in a second, but I made a video on this. It's 4 feet by 5 feet. I made it directly after I purchased my SawStop. Loved having this thing, having a big flat work surface. Highly recommend it. One of the best things you can have in your shop. Underneath the table right now, I have all of my welding stuff. So that's the Lincoln Power MIG 210. It's awesome. Next to it is the Tomahawk 375 plasma cutter. This thing is awesome because I have a compressor, but you don't need a compressor to run it, and it cuts through 3/8 inch steel pretty quickly, so that's great. And then just a bunch of other welding gear down there. So this thing is super cool. I just got it, so I haven't used it a whole lot. It is an Evolution electric steel drill press, can drill up to, I think, 1.25 inches. When you plug this thing in, it's got a switch on the back. It will magnetize the bottom of it, so if you have it sitting on top of a huge piece of steel like this or on top of your welding table, I think it holds like 2,800 pounds of magnetic force. So once you turn that thing on, it's not going anywhere. Super useful for obviously being able to drill through really thick steel gauge. Haven't used it a whole lot, but excited to have it in my shop. And then this is just a magnetic torch holder that I got from Harbor Freight. Again, once the welding table comes, this will all kind of come together a little bit better. All right, so moving right along. This is a Delta 10-inch bandsaw. I can't remember. I don't use it that much. I actually just fine-tuned it last week. It works a lot better now, so it's probably something I'll start to use a lot more. I could definitely use a new blade or a couple of new blades. So again, I like having it in the shop. I don't use that much. It's also not on wheels and it's really heavy, so it's kind of a pain in the butt to move around. This is my clamp rack. These are all the clamps I own. These are actually my favorite clamps. They can clamp like 1,000 pounds. They have this really cool function on them where you can turn the handle and actually allows you to over tighten things or tighten them more than you probably could with some of these. So super useful to have. I built this at the same time I think that I built the plywood rack. You know, super modular. It's kind of a mixture of designs of other clamp racks that I've seen from some of the makers I follow, so love having that. I have some butcher paper, so if I want to just lay that down if I'm doing finishing or you know, doing some painting or just want to protect the surface, love having that. I think it's a 30-inch wide thing and I just built a little thing to hold it. And the last thing in this corner is this clamp rack that I have that holds all my squeeze clamps. I got this design from a video Jay Bates made a bunch of years ago, but it's cool. You can basically just lift this entire thing off and bring it over to wherever you're working, and it's just very useful to not have to be doing laps in between to grab, you know, 3 squeeze clamps at a time. Also, these are awesome. They're $1. Get as many as you can at Home Depot. Buy 5 every time you go, then you'll have a perfect collection. Moving along, okay, this wall. This is just kind of my catch-all wall. I wanted to have a French Cleat system. I just thought it would look cool in the background. I found it to be pretty useful. I kind of keep all the tools I use kind of like day to day in kind of the center, easily grabbable places. Everything is just kind of custom made to fit basically what I wanted to hang. There's no like plans or specific design for it. It's just kind of like I wanted to hang chisels, so I made something to hang chisels, Forstner bits, small clamps, kind of day-to-day tools, so super useful to have. I have a small Delta drill press here. Got this for $30 on Craigslist. It's not plugged in right now, but it works great. Love having that. This is where I record all of my VO for my videos. Kind of love having this flexible arm that I can just kind of sit here and record and kind of be in my own space without any distractions. I have mostly Ryobi hand tools. They're just the cheapest beginner tool to buy. Started my collection like 5 years ago and built this drill and impact driver, little station, super simple. Just kind of gets those out of the way. I just kind of have battery chargers like in different corners of the shop. The last thing about this, so I built this giant workbench as a video, again, like 1.5 years ago. It's actually somehow one of my best performing videos. It's pretty cheap, it's like $100 to build, uses just 4x4s and 2x4s. Someone gave me this really awesome clear fir workbench top, so I upgraded from the plywood thing that I had to this. I have a bunch of drawers down here that hold various things, like I keep all of my screws and stuff in there. There's some drill bit stuff in here. Basically, it's organized chaos. I know where everything is. Nobody else could probably find anything in here. And then something I recently did was just to make these tools more accessible. I added these, I got some free under-mounted drawer pulls, so I just kind of made these drawer slides to make it easier just to pull things out and grab things. So super handy, love having that. Okay, so that will take us basically kind of back to the corner of where we started. So the last thing that I want to show you is the miter saw station. So this I've had in the shop for about 8 months now. It was one of the first things on my list that I wanted to build. Originally, I had a Ryobi miter saw with like a miter saw stand, 0 dust collection, super messy. Obviously really functional, but again, something that kind of has like completely changed the layout of my shop. So I had a few things about building my own miter saw station that were specific to my needs. The first just being mobility. It's really nice in SoCal that it's sunny so much, so I can open the garage and basically wheel this thing out, and it kind of feels like it doubles the space in what is otherwise not a huge shop. I wanted to definitely have a ton of expanded storage, something that would collect all of the dust behind it. And also specifically have a self-contained kind of dust system for it. I didn't think it would be really practical to try to plumb my Rockler setup into this thing because it was kind of going to be moving around and I wanted to be kind of freestanding and mobile. So this thing is great. It has a rigid vacuum, 16-gallon vacuum, which is connected to this Dust-Rite collector from Rockler, which is then connected to a giant port that sits kind of below the saw. All a bunch of ideas that I kind of just pulled together from various maker miter saw station builds that I found on YouTube. Favorite thing about this overall is this little plug that I have in the back. I think it was 35 bucks on Amazon. And the way it works is my saw is plugged into it, my vacuum is plugged into it. If you plug them in the right order, when I squeeze this thing on, it's great. It automatically turns on the vacuum, which means the whole kind of dust collection system of this thing is contained, and it's automatic and I don't really have to worry about turning the vacuum on and off. It runs for like 7 seconds after, so it kind of doesn't like shock it with load and unload, so just love having that. Love having a place to store my table saw sleds because those are impossible to find a good place to store and they're kind of always in the way unless you have somewhere dedicated for it. Everything obviously has cabinets on it, so it's all hidden. Trash underneath for just scraps that I probably otherwise would try to save but serve no use for me. Place to store my metal chop saw. Love that thing, super useful. Angle grinders work also, but just makes things a lot quicker. And then just a couple of drawers. These things just hold various things like glues, sandpaper. They're not super organized, but it's all kind of a work in progress. And then lastly, my fence system is kind of non-existent. I just have these little blocks that you can twist and they run along a T-track here. It's an idea I picked up from David Picciuto over at Make Something. And then the last thing is just my big Outfeed table. I've had this kind of newer setup for about 5 months now. I actually was able to acquire a bunch of free, pretty nice kitchen cabinets, a full set, so I was able to kind of design this thing around what I wanted it to be. And it's awesome. It's huge. The one thing it's not is on wheels, but I plan to upgrade that shortly in the future. But love having huge storage, love having this giant flat surface. This is just black piece of melamine, which I need to replace also because it's covered in epoxy and glue and other things. You see me at this thing, 90% of my videos. It's a great Outfeed table. It's rock solid, doesn't go anywhere. I have some bench cookies and other kind of accessories all around it. There's some storage underneath there. It's just great. Get yourself a good Outfeed table if you have the space. It obviously doesn't have to be something this big. And at some point this might be too big for this space if I kind of continue to expand my tool collection, but love having it. So that is pretty much my whole space. I've never done a shop tour like this before. Hopefully this was interesting for you. That kind of takes me to what I wanted to actually make this video originally about, which was this giant reclaimed wood wall that I have. So if you saw some of my earlier videos in this space, you know that it was just this 1/4-inch plywood that walled everything, which was great, but it was a little bit monotone and bland and actually was kind of an ugly backdrop color. My dad was flipping a house and by chance it had like this 100-year-old fence that was 2 colors for some reason, or maybe it was 2 different fences. It was just this fence wood that was dirty as heck and old, and it had lots of rot on the bottom of it, so it was just a process of kind of breaking it down and milling it and creating this, what I consider to be a really beautiful wall for wood that was otherwise just gonna be trashed. It's old, but it's, rock solid. You can hang things from it. All these things are drilled into it. It feels really sturdy. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this tour. This was a first for me. It was a lot of fun kind of taking you around my shop and kind of trying to tell you about the evolution of how this thing started and my thinking of how it kind of came together. And obviously it's a massive work in progress project that'll probably never end until I eventually move out of this space. But this has been the greatest thing about me moving into my first house, is just having my own space to make. I absolutely love it. Hopefully some of the things I showed you gave you inspiration for your own space, whether it's a 3,000 square foot shop that you're building yourself or a 1-car garage that you're gonna make your own and make awesome. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this tour. Would love it if you would subscribe to the channel if that is your thing. I try to put out videos every couple of weeks. Some of them will be a little bit more talking to camera like this moving forward, which I'm excited to do, show you a bit more of my personality. But yeah, thanks for stopping by, guys. I'll see you at the next video.